Hey guys, Thomas is here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Finch. If you end up enjoying this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. The second one will head you over to my Patreon page. Any donations are desperately needed. And with shilling out of the way, I'll remind you at the end of the review. And with that being said, let's get on with the movie review of Finch. So I had seen at least one tweet about this movie, nothing else in particular. I saw some article about Tom Hanks being in this movie, and that was the only information I had really going in. So, with that being said, this movie takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, in a dusty sand trail where we see Tom Hanks, who plays the man Finch. He seems to be enjoying or trying to get past the time by whistling and singing as he's patrolling an area. And he has a little robotic rover following him. Not the thing on the right you see on the poster, but a smaller little, like the moon rover. The moon rover is called a Dewey. And the dog, for all intents and purposes, when he returns, the one on his left, is mostly referred to dog, but he does have another name. But for simplicity, we'll just call him the dog. Anyways, once he's cleared the building he was in, he sprays it to make sure that, that he knows for whenever next time he's out, he doesn't, revisit. And we see him moving with caution when he hears a little noise. So, definitely a lot going on, visually speaking, in terms of what's going on here. However, when he heads back out, a sandstorm approaches, so he has to move back to his base, essentially. So, he cleans his suit when he makes it back to his base, takes a shower, and, very notably, he starts coughing, which is very relevant throughout the entire movie, as we will see. So, he plays with his dog, and it's a nice little moment. He feeds the dog, and the dog waits for him to eat or waiting to get approval, so very good boy. And he seems to be working on something, downloading something, and he's using books to do something. There's very tech stuff going on when he's in his little base. He starts to build the robot you see on the right. And we see that the robot's head is completed by this point, and the robot already seems to have 4 different directives, but we only hear the first one and the last one. The first one being not to harm a human, as in him, and to prioritize the dog if anything should happen to Finch. And in terms of this robot's personality, because it does have one, it's sort of like if Google was a child, essentially. It asks a lot of questions, but when it is asked a question, it knows the answer via doing a search. It's very much a representation of like a young adolescent Google. Anyway. So, the lights go out. He's trying to teach... he's using the robot to see what the weather pattern is going to be like, and he finds out that the area he's staying in, the storm that is approaching on him, the new one, the second one, will last 40 days. So he knows that that's not gonna do. He's not gonna survive based on what he has. So he goes to his maps and he decides to head west. Uh, and he rushes the process of teaching his robot how to walk, building up his stuff, and they begin to drive. Uh, so he stops to look at the robot, and after making some distance, they head into a theater where Finch starts to try to teach this robot the rules of how to go about getting stuff. The robot sees itself in the mirror and is quite curious about this phenomenon. But another tornado is starting up, so they have to drive down once more, but this time they aren't quite fast enough, so they decide to tie down the vehicle, and the vehicle hatches that they set down nearly all break off except one. And thus the robot has a little rattling in his head that lasts for a little bit. They replace one of the wheels using the robot as a jack. And here, after they fix the jack, the robot Finch decides that this robot needs a name, so it eventually just randomly chooses the name Jeff. So Jeff, trying to be more, active, is trying to communicate with the dog. Again, very young mind. And here we see Finch trying to explain trust through a story. These little stories are without the movie. This is the first of many, and how trust is all this stuff. And of course, we see the next episode of him coughing again. So, we quickly learn through the process of it that the shade protects them from getting burned, and that is how bad it is outside. And he yells at the robot because it drove away from the place that they were staying, and he tells the robot to grow up. Again, very akin to what I've been saying, is that the robot appears and was made so it was very young. Literally and figuratively. And during this process of after the math of that, he tries to teach the robot how to drive, and it does effectively start to kick in. However, during the night, they sit outside. So this is a fascinating little feature. They are able to do so, and they see the aurora borealis outside, even though they're nowhere near the poles. And he talks about how you can't trust anyone, and how that could potentially even get you killed if you do. So this is insinuating that there are other people in the world, even though at most we only see one other vehicle worth of person or potential people within this entire movie. And he talks about more so how raw emotion eventually takes over everyone eventually, which is very akin to, I guess, the theme of this movie. And we see that his sickness is still getting worse. So Jeff tells him up, and he's the one driving now. And now he's the one primarily heading out. He's heading out with the littler robot Dewey. And Finch eventually wakes up and, realizes it, so he's trying to suit up fast enough. But Dewey is caught by a bear trap while Jeff is off finding supplies. And Finch eventually finds him and is trying to get him to flee, so they do so. And once they flee, gathering all the supplies, a car, as I mentioned, starts to follow them. So they keep driving, and Finch notices that they're being followed. So they eventually head off of a bridge path and hide under the bridge. And it doesn't quite fit, but Jeff manages to push it all the way underneath so that the people above would keep going straight, which they do. And Finch says that he officially gives up. He's just done. He's done trying to survive. And Jeff at this moment is trying to believe in Finch. So Finch, talking about another story, talks about how this world a little bit about how this world came to be through a solar flare, and how people kind of took care of the rest of what was left after one solar flare. And then he talks about another story where a mom and a girl are out and about, and the girl has a gun, and how the woman told the girl to shoot anyone, and then a man came up, and then a fire out began with the three of them within the vicinity, and Finch eventually came out and found the dog as a puppy. So this was like probably a bit ago. As they have driven kind of far at this point, Finch eventually they had hit a butterfly, which was kind of bizarre. So Finch, during the day, steps outside without his suit, seeing another butterfly, and this cultivates in them realizing that the West was truly the direction to go in, because there's no heat wave in this area, it appears. And Jeff talks about how he had a dream as a robot, which is kind of fascinating, but okay. And talking about stories, Finch talks about how his dad left him, and he talks about sort of the other theme of the movie, or primary theme, I'm not sure which one it is, but he talks about how there's a difference between the facts being, told to you, which is, again, what the robot has been doing throughout the movie, and experiencing something, going somewhere, seeing it for yourself, which I guess is the overall theme of the movie, with how the characters are portrayed, primarily, the robot representing the facts as they are, or trying to learn the facts as they are, and then presenting facts if they are not known, versus actually doing the thing, which is what Finch has been trying to do throughout the movie, but is becoming less and less effective as he's gone sicker and sicker throughout the movie. Finch says an interesting close to last bit, that he says to trust him during this little bit. And shortly after saying to trust him, he says that he's going to die, and that his journey is pretty much just over. The sickness has overwhelmed him. He got he's hacking up blood. And indeed, in the final act of the movie, Finch dies. One of the lead characters dies. And we are left with Jeff asking, trying to understand what to do now that it is just him and the dog, because the Dewey robot got destroyed a bit ago. So he tries to feed the dog and does so successfully. Throws the ball to the dog successfully. Sets up a little burial for Finch. And heads towards I believe it's the Golden Gate Bridge, or a bridge equivalent to that, whatever the bridge is in San Francisco. Point being that they end up heading there. And they see along the bridge wall fence that there are several post-it notes of like people taking pictures, and Finch adds his own as he continues to walk the dog into the sunset, and with him trying to tell his own little story, and that is how the movie ends. Now, what I find so fascinating about this movie is that there really isn't any action in it, and I know it's an odd thing to praise, but to be quite frank, I have seen a lot of superhero movies lately, so it is a nice change of pace to see a movie, be a little different in that regard. This movie isn't dependent on action. It's very low key in terms of that. The tension obviously comes more from the storms that are encroaching, and yeah, technically, if you want to be technical about it, you could see that the storms act as a way to move the plot from a point to another point. That's essentially, when you break it down to its core essentials, that's what's happening, but, um, it gets the job done, and it poses enough of a threat an effective threat to get us to move to the next set piece. And it is just quite fascinating, because this is a much more low-key movie, and it's just about a man who built this machine. This machine, levels of intelligence was pretty sophisticated, and obviously is becoming more sophisticated as it's able to learn on top of what it can research, so it'll probably be super effective. Now, how long that dog will last, that's a question mark, unfortunately. That is the brutal reality of a post-apocalyptic world, is that, that dog looks pretty old too, so not sure how long that was going to last. But the movie seems to end on a high note, or, well, not a high note, but a sort of somber but still, the journey will continue for at least the robot and the dog for now, as they, move on. So yeah, I found this movie pretty effective. It was pretty good. I'd probably give it the solid 7 out of 10. I found it, average, enjoyable. In terms of flaws, you could probably pick little things apart here and there, I'm sure, but, that's probably where I would leave it. And that is my review of Finch. So if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page. Any donations are desperately needed, and until next time, everyone, bye-bye!